Hello, it's time for Combat Patrol Carnage. So we're back with issue 44, we've updated all our models in our collection, and now we're on to our lore articles. So we have a couple of pages of lore and a new page for our short story featuring Sergeant Askerton and his Silver Templars. So lore-wise, we look at the twin-headed gods Gork and Mork. We also look at ranged weapons of the various different armies in the galaxy. So not a lot to go through, but it'll still make a pretty interesting video nonetheless. So without further ado, let's head to the table and get on and do some reading. But before we do, don't forget to, of course, do all the usual. Like this video if you're enjoying the Combat Patrol content, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of it, and of course drop me a comment down below. Love hearing back from you guys, and it goes a massive way to help the channel out, and I love hearing your feedback as well. Finally then, Combat Patrol Carnage is proudly sponsored by warbay.shop. Your one-stop supply for all your hobby needs. They stock everything you need, you can get started and expand your brand new army. You can even decorate your hobby area with some nice pieces of artwork and decorative items for your bags. They also stock past and present partworks from Hachette, including Combat Patrol. So if you want extra issues, there's a dedicated page for Combat Patrol, so check them out in the video description, or head down to their store, and who knows, you might find your next hobby project at a bit of a discount. Right, it's lore time. Let's head to the table. So here we are then, back with issue 44. So we've updated all our models now. Everybody is based, and we can put these two paints to one side for use in our future issues. So yeah, two great paints to add to our collection, and we'll have nice unified forces once we're finished. Well, providing your basing scheme is following the magazine. For the collections of the magazine, yeah, my base scheme is following that, but personally I do prefer lighter bases. Sort of helps the model stand out a little bit better, I think. Unless you're a really bright scheme like my Iandan Force, in which case the darker bases work quite nicely. But with that said, let's adjust the camera and we can dive into this issue's lore articles. So here we go, we've got a couple of read through, so let's head through our paint guide and we'll be right there. Boom, here we are. So first off, we learn about the orc gods, Gork and Mork. Even the orcs have gods, and as with many species, their gods are reflections of the orcs' own desires and obsessions. It should therefore not come as a surprise that their gods' primary characteristics are low cunning and savage brutality. These values are embodied in the two brother deities, Gork and Mork. Gork is the orc god of brutality, but he is also pretty cunning. Mork is the orc god of cunning, but he is also pretty brutal. Gork and Mork are the twin gods of the orcs and the personifications of their species' defining philosophies. Gork is direct and unsubtle, favouring a forceful and belligerent approach. He doesn't hold with messing around crafting weapons or spending time developing plans. That's wasted effort to him. Instead, the Gorkish approach is to charge screaming at the enemy and kick them in the teeth until a long while after they have stopped moving. However, even the limited amount of guile possessed by Gork and his followers allows for the boys to buy or steal big, shooty guns and strap on crude plates of armour in preparation for a big fight. Mork, on the other hand, is no less barbarous, but he prefers to deliver violence through his devious cunning. A Morkish approach is to sneak up behind an enemy and bash their skull in while their back is turned. He is also more open to the idea of invention, delighting in wicked war machines and deadly vehicles that can be used on the battlefield to unleash even more brutal assaults on the cowering enemy. Mechanical mayhem. Inspired by visions of war from Gork and visions of cunning victory from Mork, some orcs are inspired to create ramshackle weapons and contraptions. These deadly devices can be anything from rattling tanks to giant stomping effigies, or their hulls bristling with improvised weapons. Divine motives. Across the whole galaxy, endless hordes of orcs and grots are inspired to even more brutal and cunning acts of warfare. Each of them, from the smallest Gretchen to the biggest of bosses, are propelled by the same divine drive to combat and bloodshed. Weird energy. The strange energy that is generated by orcs is channeled by a select few known as Weird Boys. These strangest of orcs are feared by both friends and foe, as they are somewhere between being crazed, cackling maniacs and walking psychic grenades. Visions of war. When excitement swells and the desire for combat reaches its peak, a strange energy will build in an orcish horde. Some orcs will start to experience visions. They will see war-torn sections of the galaxy and worlds not yet touched by the horror of conflict. All perfect targets for an orc invasion. Yeah, nice little introduction about the philosophical side of the orcs. Yeah. It doesn't do to dwell on the orcish philosophies, as, yeah, it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. Moving on, we take a look at Technology Part 2 with ranged weapons. Ranged weapons take a central place in most armies' arsenals. Although all soldiers must be prepared for close-quarter combat, it is a great advantage to them if they can dispatch the enemy from a distance, advancing to objectives under the protective curtain of supporting fire, or beating back attacks from behind safe cover. On the battlefields of the far future, the crack of projectiles is heard all around as combatants exchange salvos of fire. Soldiers dive for cover under devastating hails of enemy fire. Shells and rockets fly overhead, raining down explosive death from above. Hulking armoured vehicles are stopped in their tracks, their armour plating blown or melted apart. There is great diversity across all armies throughout the galaxy, but one thing that they all rely on is the power of their ranged weapons, to turn the tide of battle in their favour. The design of the weapons is shaped by the strengths of the species who wield them, both their physical capabilities on the battlefield and also their mastery of technology. Where one species possesses strength great enough to provide stability for a huge roaring gun, other species possess the technology to pack the same lethal effect into a searing ray of concentrated light. Standard issue weapons. Whether they fire bullets, bolts, shurikens, lasers, or something even stranger, each army will have a standard personal weapon that is issued to the bulk of its troops. These balance the need for lethality with the necessity of mass-producing simple and reliable weaponry. They are often carried by frontline troops and used for holding positions or for making rapid assaults on the enemy. There are 5 examples of sort of standard issue war gear. So the Astra Militarum have the ubiquitous las gun. The Adeptus Sororitas, among others, make use of the pretty standard issue bolt gun there. The Godwin Deus pattern is favoured by the sisters. Necrons here have their Gauss weapons, or Gorse weapons, with the Reaper here, which is a shorter, close range but more firepower sort of version. Or else they got the Gorse Flayer, which is a longer barreled gun, ideal for picking up targets at a bit better range. Tau Fire Warriors here use pulse weaponry, so they got the pulse rifle as well as pulse carbines for closer range firefights. And the Drukhari make use of splinter weapons, which is a similar kind of weaponry to their Eldari kin, but uses more needle-like weaponry. Moving on, we take a look at special weapons. In the 41st millennium, armies make use of diverse special weaponry to carry out specific battlefield roles. These include armor-melting plasma weapons, long-distance laser weapons, bunker-busting rocket launchers, and many other weapons besides. Whether an army needs to clear out troops from fortified positions, disable heavily armoured vehicles, or bring down aircraft, there's usually an ideal tool for the job. So again, we've got the Astra Militarum here, sporting the good old hotshot las gun, a upgraded version of the lasgun, favoured by the elite troops like the Askerton and the Tempesta Scions. A Space Marine here from the Blood Angels wields a plasma incinerator, a weapon that has 3 various ways of doing. You got the assault version here. There's a more longer range version, and then there's a heavier version that uses the power pack to enhance the power of the plasma. For flaming weapons, we've got an Orc Burner Boy here. This is specifically the one from the Commandos. Here he wields a flamethrower to help incinerate enemies in close quarters and confined areas. Finally, we got a Kroot Carnivore here with a Tangle Bomb launcher, so basically a net launcher. Heavy weapons. Sometimes what armies need on the battlefield is simply heavier hitting weapons. These can be used to mow down heavily armoured enemy troops, shoot greater than average distances, or take down light vehicles and aircraft. Due to their weight and complexity, heavy weapons are usually carried by the elite of veteran troops who can use their superior training to make the most of these weapons. Heavy weapons are often used by fire support troops. So for Tyranids here, we've got a Tyranid warrior wielding a venom cannon. So various sizes of this weapon are wielded by different sized Tyranid creatures. Usually anything larger than the warrior will wield them, so you can look at things like the Carnifexes as well as the Hive Tyrants. The Thousand Suns with their Soul Reaper cannons, so a mass shooting anti-infantry sort of gun. And we got the Leagues of Rattan here being represented with the Magna Rail rifle. So rail technology isn't new to the galaxy. The Tau have used rail weapons before, but yeah, the Rattan have got an imperialish version of the rail technology that they have improved over centuries of isolation. So finally at the bottom we got again a sort of recap. So we got the standard issue bolt gun, the special plasma incinerator, and the heavy weapon, the heavy bolter there. All versions of the weapons used by Space Marines. So, with the look at technology out of the way, we can move on to our next page, looking at Bonds of Honor, Part 11. So, we continue Sergeant Askerton's story.
Come along, young ones. Follow me. But stand up straight and walk with a bit of pride and a sense of purpose. As you take your impressions of the marvels of Colossus, the brothers of this hallowed place will take their first impression of you. And they will be your future brothers if you survive the grueling transformation into Space Marines. So you might want to make it a good first impression. Isn't that right, Nikandor? Pull your shoulders back. That's better. Now, we were talking about our good sergeant, weren't we? But where did I get to? Sergeant Askerton may have set out to recover his lost bolt rifle, but he had been drawn into a fair mess for his trouble. When it was not to be found in the path of the vessel from which it had fallen, he hunted down the ships of nearby scavengers who had looted the area. It was not to be found with them, but then the search was interrupted. They faced the Eldari and the Chaos Space Marines out in the black of the heavens, and they crashed along with their pursuers on some Emperor-forsaken, orc-infested mudball. Have I told you about the nighttime raid yet? Ah, of course. They had just encountered a mob of orcs, charging towards them in broad daylight. Well, that was another mess that they had to get out of before going any further. One of the things that you learn about orcs is their tenacious nature. It is not tenacious in the way you have been, suppressing your own needs and enduring great pain because you have a high understanding of a goal that you want to reach. When I say the orcs are tenacious, I mean that they do not know any other way to be. They are not in pain and fighting against their natures. They are in their element and ever more willing to throw themselves into the fray, even as their companions fall about them. Even as their limbs are hacked and blasted from their body, still they persist with great and wholehearted relish. Mind you, we have a few tricks of our own, and once you become a Silver Templar, you will find you have a natural capacity to endure much that would previously have brought you to your knees. So perhaps the brethren do not always suffer as you may suppose, but let me get back to my tale. As they stood by the crashed remnants of the Chaos Space Marine ship with their foes' fallen bodies strewn about, a war cry went up as the orcs arrived. Over the horizon came a swarm of rickety flying machines, each crewed by a single orc and bristling with guns and rockets. They looked and flew as though they were held together by yarn and wishful thinking, and not a good quality of yarn at that. They proceeded stuttering through the air, dropping and then regaining height, all the while billowing out plumes of choking black smoke. This was not a battle that the brothers were keen to be in. The advantage was not theirs, and having appraised their position, they hastily withdrew. The orcs, luckily, did not fully realize that the downed Chaos craft was truly destroyed, and they set about it with great glee. Their foot soldiers kicked and pummeled the remains of the crew, totally unconcerned for their lack of response. Under cover of darkness, Orc commandos set out to encircle their opponents and mount a surprise attack on them from all sides. And the pilots of the flying machines set about shooting and bombing the slabs of downed fuselage and sections of crashed craft. In the confusion, the brothers slipped away. They supposed that the orcs didn't realize they and the Chaos Space Marines were enemies. The occupants of both craft were strange and foreign soldiers in heavy armor, who fell from the sky at the same time. Why would they assume that the two groups were anything other than allies? It did not take the squad long to get to a safe distance. They traversed along the blind side of a ridge, hidden from view. As they went, Darion kept moving up to the top to check that they were not being followed. And truly, the orcs seemed far more interested in making complete the destruction of the Chaos vessel. More importantly, at a distance, he could clearly see the tracks behind the orcs leading back to a walled encampment a few miles hence. Sergeant Askerton immediately saw a way to rid themselves of the orcs. They could fight or outmaneuver their infantry easily enough, but the same could not be said for their aircraft, and here was their chance, a raid on the camp under the cover of darkness to target those damned flying machines. A handful of Space Marines can do a lot of damage in the moments of uncertainty when they mount a surprise attack, and they should be able to easily disable them before the foe could mount a defense. It did not take long for night to draw in, and the squad made light work of the distance between their position and the orc encampment. They headed straight for the section of wall that was closest to the death copters, but as the brothers came towards their destination, they became aware of movement behind them. Mektras turned in haste and loosed around. The flash from the muzzle of his bolt rifle lit the squad, and where the bolt hit its target, it exploded in another flash of light and a shower of gore. The light glinted off the silver armor of the squad, off the ground on which they stood, and off the advancing enemy. A squad of orc commandos that now stood between the brothers and their escape, stalking them. Then the flash was gone and the darkness fell again. And at that moment, all they could hear was the thud of the single dead orc as it fell to the ground. Suddenly, a great screaming cry was taken up from the camp, and the orcs, seemingly prepared for a nighttime skirmish, rushed out all at once. The brothers were surrounded, and as one, they moved into a ring and began to fire their weapons. In the sudden confusion, there was only one thing certain, rather than a quick raid and an easy victory. The Silver Templars were in for a nightmarish fight. A squadron of deathcopters strafed its target, raining down bombs and rockets. So there we go, with Sergeant and his squad are now pinned against the walls of the orc encampment and surrounded on all sides. Let's just hope those deathcopters don't take off anytime soon. So next we've got a couple of pages of rules to look at before we hit our game, which we're going to be playing Scorched Earth, a brand new scenario, and we'll be using the Chaos Space Marines and Eldari with their additional units switched in. So that'll be an interesting game, I think. But there we go, that is it for issue 44 for the moment. So yeah, some nice new bits of information, a look at Orc Gods, a look at technology, and of course the continuation there of Sergeant Askerton's
quest for his missing rifle. Let's hope they can actually get out of this one, because it could be the end for the poor sergeant and his squad. It's 10 men against what could be hundreds, if not thousands of orcs. Surely enough, though, one Space Marine is easily equal to 100 orcs, so they should be able to survive. But we'll have to wait for a future issue where we get the next installment, and I don't think that's going to be until next delivery, sadly. But we've got a lot to look forward to. There's some more lore to come in future issues. The next issue, though, is going to be the York Boys, so another dedicated to the orcs issue. So be prepared for kind of a repeat of last week. But all that's left for me to do is say thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time on more Combat Patrol Carnage. Goodbye.